พี่ตั้มเมื่อไหร่พร้อมบอกนะฮะ Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondent Club of Thailand. My name is Panu Wongcheum. I'm the current Vice President and reporters from Reuters. Today we have a privilege to welcome and our extreme panels from the Reporters Without Borders, which will give assessment on the press freedom in Thailand in the last 6 months after this current government came to power, and present its current and forthcoming activities in the country. Press freedom has been a big issue here for many, many years, especially through the military period. So we're looking forward to hear what our esteemed guests will have to say about the state of press freedom in Thailand and their future activities here, not just about Thailand, but also beyond across Asia. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Cedric Alviani, the Bureau Director of RSF Asia-Pacific, who's in the middle, and of course 2 of his colleagues who will join in and present their report. So please take away, Cedric.
Okay. Good afternoon. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here today. Especially, I will always have a special Thailand will always have a special place in my heart, because that's where 25 years ago I started my professional career. At that time, working for the French embassy in the field of cultural cooperation. Of course, now I'm working for an international non-profit organization, but I never left Asia after Thailand. I was mostly, and I'm still based in Taiwan, where in 2017, Reporters Without Borders has opened its first bureau in Asia. I will apologize for the catchy title, but actually we do not have the pretension to tell you what is the situation in Thailand. All of you know much better than we do, and actually we wish that the part talking about the situation in Thailand is more like a dialogue between us. What we are going to do is introduce Reporters Without Borders, which is an NGO which has changed tremendously over the past decade. Our activities in the region, the programs which we have developed as tools to support journalism and to fight against disinformation. And of course, we are at your disposal to discuss any issue that relates to Thailand. We of course know the main issues, especially the question of defamation, which might add a lot of pressure on journalists in the region. And we'll be very happy to discuss with you about these themes. But I would say also to listen to your opinion. Our bureau, which is based in Taipei, was originally the East Asian Bureau and only covering China and the neighboring countries. And only last summer we expanded our activities to cover the whole Asia-Pacific region, which explains why it is our first official mission to Bangkok, but it's definitely not the last. Over the past years, we focused majorly on the nefarious influence of the Chinese regime in the region, but I believe that actually the influence, the growing influence of authoritarian regimes in Asia-Pacific region is not the cause, but the consequence of the weakness of democracies. And we wish to engage more with democratic countries, with journalists, with media organizations, with the civil society, and ideally with governments in democracies in the region, so that together we would be stronger to fight against authoritarianism and strengthen democracies. Yeah. So some of you must have heard of Reporters Without Borders. It is an NGO that was created in 1985 in Paris. Over the past 10 years, we have developed quite a strong international network that is composed of 150 correspondents, covering almost every country in the world, and also a network of bureaus. The major bureaus outside of Europe are located in Washington, D.C., Rio for Latin America, Tunis and Dakar in Africa, London, and also Taipei since 2017. And as you can see, our organization has an observatory position in most international organizations, which allows us to efficiently impart our advocacy positions and try to obtain their support on our projects. Yes, so I'm going to introduce briefly a few programs conducted by RSF to support journalism. The first one, you must have heard of it, is the World Press Freedom Index. Actually, yesterday I was speaking at a fact-checking event. I bumped into the governor of Bangkok, and the first thing he said was, "Oh, RSF, the World Press Freedom Index." So I believe it is quite well known. It is a tool which we use for advocacy purpose and which we try to make in the most, unbiased way possible. And it's very difficult because, of course, you cannot only assess press freedom in a scientific way by sending questionnaires. Imagine that I could send a questionnaire to every journalist on Earth to assess the level of press freedom. Probably #1 country would be China, because they have the largest number of journalists. So we need different indicators. We are trying to grow the number of respondents to our study, but of course we limit the respondents to the persons who share the fundamental values that journalism consists of imparting facts in order to support the good of the public. If the definition of journalism is to support the government's position, then we do not agree, of course. So this is the World Press Freedom Index of last year. You can see that Thailand, comparatively to the countries in the region, is not ranked so badly. I believe last year's ranking was 106th, which is more or less the middle of the ranking, since our ranking evaluates 180 countries and territories. I do not have all the maps of the previous years, but unfortunately the map is darkening a little bit every year. Somehow the situation of press freedom and the right of the people to information in the world is far from improving year after year. So unfortunately, the number of countries which have a good situation has not shrinked to a few countries in the north of Europe, and very few other exceptions. One of the global campaigns we lead is a campaign against authoritarianism. Okay, I'm sorry, you hear I'm French, so you will be nice and not notice my problem with English grammar. We do not want to focus especially on China, and we actually are friends of the Chinese people, but we believe that the role of friends is to alert the people when their government is depriving them of their rights, which is the case in China, obviously, which is the case in Russia, which is the case in Turkey, which is the case in more and more countries. In a democracy like India, it's harder and harder for journalists to investigate on certain topics. There's a growing pressure from the government. So China is somehow only an example of this tendency. But it may be the strongest example, and I believe in Bangkok you can feel the strong influence of the Chinese embassy and the Chinese propaganda agency Xinhua, which invites every year, according to the figures I could receive, 100 or more journalists for training in Beijing, in which journalists are being taught to work for their government and consider themselves journalists. We also heard that Xinhua News Agency provides every month 60,000 pieces of information translated in Thai, available for free to every Thai media, so that they can convey, without necessarily realizing it, the point of view of China. So of course, the problem of propaganda and disinformation carried by China and the bad influence it has on other countries, including democracies, is truly a problem. Yeah, we're also leading global campaigns for detained defenders of press freedom. I'm mentioning press freedom defenders because we do not only support professional journalists, we do also support non-professional journalists, some special categories of journalists like political commentators or cartoonists, and also some persons who have been an important source for the media to receive information, which is the case for Julian Assange. You will also notice that Reporters Without Borders does not particularly bash on developing countries only, but is actually present everywhere there is a problem relating to press freedom, including in Western democracies like the UK or US for the case of Julian Assange. And I'm proud to say that we sometimes get results. Actually, Olivier Dubois, who was French reporter kidnapped in Mali, and Mortaza Berboudi, who was Afghan French reporter detained in Afghanistan, have both been freed recently. I wouldn't say thanks to Reporters Without Borders, because that would be exaggerate, but we were part of the coalition of NGOs and other forces that managed to obtain their liberation. Yeah. We also do training and capacity building activities on the floor. When Russia invaded Ukraine, it took us only 2 months to open a press freedom center that is providing protective equipment for journalists, which were very much needed at this time. We recently opened another press freedom center in Beirut, which provides the same type of services for journalists covering the war in Gaza. We also have programs in different countries in the world to support journalist safety. And you can see the photo on the right was taken in Kabul, where we used to have quite a large program to support women journalists in the country. We unfortunately had to end this program when the Taliban gained power in Afghanistan. Okay. This is a website which we operate and which is dedicated to journalist safety. You're welcome to use it and promote it. It's so far available in English, Chinese. We translated it in Ukrainian last year, and in the future we're planning to add other languages. I believe that a Burmese language should be added and hopefully Thai language at some point, although of course it is not the same level of priority. Okay, so I was talking about, I would say, what NGOs usually do, but actually Reporters Without Borders is also trying not only to put a band-aid on difficult situations relating to press freedom, but also to contribute to the creation of solutions to support the strengthening of the right to information in the world and to fight against disinformation. I'm going to introduce a few of these solutions. Well, the first one, which might look like a gadget, but is not a gadget, is the launch a few months ago of a satellite service to impart uncensored information in occupied territories in Ukraine and also on a part of Russia. This is very important and very symbolic. And this is a project that only took 2 years to develop. We're quite proud that now the people in occupied regions of Ukraine and in Russia are able to access 25 independent radio and television channels in Russian. So this gives them the opportunity to access other type of information and hopefully bypass censorship. Reporters Without Borders has also launched in late last year the first international charter on artificial intelligence and journalism. This was becoming a need because somehow no editorial department in the world will be able to escape that phenomenon. AI is appearing everywhere. The management of media outlets is, of course, asking journalists to look for AI-powered solutions and to use them. The question is, how can we do this while remaining ethical, while respecting the basics of journalism ethics? So we launched the Paris Charter on AI and journalism. Of course, none of our activities is done only by RSF. There's always a commission of specialists. This commission, in the case of the AI, the Paris AI Charter, was presided by Maria Ressa, a Nobel Peace Prize from the Philippines, who was very active in the redaction of the text. We launched another project, which is a very long-term project called Information and Democracy Initiative. This project is now separate from Reporters Without Borders, and I would say flying its own wings, and this is the best we could hope from such a project. In 2018, we created a working group made of experts, and they released a declaration that emphasizes the importance of information in democracy. How, without independent information, voters in a democracy are not able to make an educated choice and are easily manipulated. So how important a free, pluralistic, unbiased information is important for the proper functioning of democracies. Following this declaration, we had governments endorse this declaration, and I'm proud to say that to date 52 countries in the world have endorsed this declaration into a partnership, and it's still counting. We are currently considering to invite countries in the region to join the initiative, and indeed it would be good if we could have countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines joining, because the purpose of this group is to discuss solutions on how democracies can protect themselves from disinformation while remaining democratic. Which are the solutions to disinformation which are not censorship? Because even in the best democracies, the first temptation of politicians or government employees is to try to censor information when they think it's fake news. The problem is if they do this without a due process, then they somehow do the same thing that authoritarian governments do when they accuse legitimate media organizations of imparting fake news. So it's very important that democracies develop together their own solutions to protect themselves against the phenomenon of disinformation. And now this project has developed a forum and some working groups that work together in offering some ready-made policies, ready-made, but it's like a tool, so every government is welcome to use them, to modify them in the way that works better for them, and to integrate them into their regulation or their practices. We also developed a project we are very proud of, called Journalism Trust Initiative. My colleague Liang Wei will actually make a complete introduction about this project, so I will just say a few words. This is the first international news production ISO standard. If some of you are familiar with industrial certification, the idea is for a factory to assess the quality of the product it makes, which cannot be done by testing every product because it wouldn't be scalable. So they assess the processes of production of the products. And for example, if I buy a bottle of water and it has an ISO certification, it doesn't tell me the water is great quality. It tells me that the water is drinkable, that there shouldn't be too much plastic in it, and there shouldn't be too much chemicals in it, that's all. And actually, we thought of using the same process for the process of news production, and it actually works, because news production can be assessed in the same way that any other production can be assessed. We do not, I say we, but Reporters Without Borders is not involved. It is a certification body involved, just like for other businesses. And the assessment made is only on the processes, the identity of the media, and the way they work in producing information, the way the system they have put in place to ensure the respect of ethics, but not their political orientation or not the quality per se of their reporting. But my colleague Liang Wei will introduce it later. The idea is that in the future, quality news producers would be rewarded by platforms, by governments, by advertisers for the work they do, while currently it's easier to produce disinformation contents, and it actually pays more. If you create a clickbait website, you unfortunately will make more money than creating a news website. You will spend much less time to write articles, and this is what this project is trying to reverse. But Liang Wei will tell you more information. And the last, we are in the process of creating an Asia-Pacific Media Alliance to fight against disinformation. We are starting to invite media outlets and media organizations from the Asia-Pacific countries to join a group in which we would exchange good practices, and we would work on imparting some of these solutions I introduced earlier. The idea is also that together, media outlets, media organizations, and NGO, we are stronger when we talk to governments rather than just going separately, which obviously is not so efficient. And of course, Thailand is one of the priority countries of this project. Yes, so that was my presentation of Reporters Without Borders. My colleagues later are going to talk about Journalism Trust Initiative and also about the upcoming release of the World Press Freedom Index. We'll be back to Bangkok in 1 month to release on Press Freedom Day the World Press Freedom Index, maybe actually at the club, hopefully. So Alexandra will introduce a bit more about the process. When it goes to Thailand, we will have a lot of time after these quick presentations to talk about the situation in Thailand, and we are at your disposal to answer any question. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cedric. So you have further...
Yeah, Liang Wei is going to...
Okay, please.
Microphone away now. You want to? Okay.
How is it even possible? Okay. Yeah.
Welcome.
Well, good morning and thank you for coming. So in what follows, I will briefly walk you through what Journalism Trust Initiative is. So Journalism Trust Initiative sees journalism as the vital component of the news publishing industry in the information market. And we also notice that this industry is under threat of the fake content industry. So what are the existing solutions? Existing solutions can be roughly categorized into these two categories. So you see a timeline here. There are a bunch of existing solutions being put into place to do fact-checking, debunking, and we also see downranking on some search engines, and that's what we call the ex-post, after the event solutions. And there are also some ex-ante, before the event solutions to combat disinformation. However, we think that there is a bit of a void in the category of before the event solutions, because nowadays what we see is the ever-growing blacklist of disinformation websites, whereas readers and audiences normally don't really know how to navigate themselves on the information space. So that's why Reporters Without Borders request to the European Committee for Standardization to the creation of this JTI and ISO standard for the news publishing industries. So you can think Journalism Trust Initiative as a white list for ethical media outlets or newsrooms, and who can appear on the white list. In fact, Reporters Without Borders did not make the benchmarks ourselves. We follow and we resort to the existing international principles of standard development. So for a standard to be made internationally accepted, it must follow these 4 principles. So the first is that this standard must be made to respond to the actual need in the market. And second, it must be made based on global experts' opinion. So as you can see that AP, AFP, BBC, they are members of this technical committee who come up with this JTI standard. And third, the standard must be developed through a multi-stakeholder process. And then after the media experts reach to a consensus, will we release this standard. And this standard has not yet received an ISO number, but it is now published as a workshop agreement by the European Committee for Standardization. So Journalism Trust Initiative, in a nutshell, is the name of the first ever ISO type standard for news publisher aimed at boosting transparent, independent, and responsible newsroom. And as a standard, as an international standard, it is designed to cater to newsrooms and media outlets of all types. So we also work with radios and TV stations. And what it does is not to replace any kind of existing code of conduct, but what it does is try to consolidate the existing code of conduct by introducing the certification system. And here you can roughly see the 18 clauses that constitute the JTI standards. So in the first part, media outlets are invited to do some self-evaluations on their identity. For instance, do they reveal like the board members? Do they reveal any kind of collusion with the any political parties? And we also assessed how they work. So basically, we would like to invite media outlets to tell us who they are and how they work. And you can scan the QR code for the full text of these JTI standard. And taking into account today's media environment, we also make sure that JTI is made machine readable and it is internationally certifiable. So JTI can actually bring benefits to stakeholders in the information market. For starter, for media outlets, The standard can be used internally as a diagnostic tools that they use to evaluate their existing managerial and editorial processes. And as a self-regulatory mechanism, it can also help to ensure the legal compliances, and in the long run, it can enhance the credibilities and reputation of a newsroom. And for readers, the trust label of JTI can be helpful for them to make informed decisions on their consumptions or distribution of information online. And for advertisers and intermediaries, JTI can also be used as a label that they use to place their advertisement. For instance, we are working closely and consulted by the Global Alliance for Responsible Media to offer some of the biggest advertisers of the list of media websites or landing page that produce ethical journalistic content. And last but not least, JTI can be also used by funding or regulatory bodies as a normative assessment tools when they allocate fund or try to incubate some of the small to medium-sized newsrooms. So zoom in on the benefit for compliant media outlet. JTI makes sure that in the long run, media outlet who become JTI compliant can expect a boost in algorithmic indexing. In fact, we are currently piloting some of the data of JTI compliant media outlets in France with Microsoft, and hoping that some of the ethical content will have a better visibility on search engine. And second, media outlet can also expect and increase advertising revenues. And third, JTI label can also be helpful in unlocking some of the new funding opportunities for media outlet. So this is how the JTI works. Basically, we invite media outlets to start self-assessment on the JTI platform, and this self-assessment is completely free of charge. And once they finish the self-assessment, they can publish the result of their self-assessment in the form of transparency reports. And third, to receive a JTI certification, they will need to get in contact with accredited certification bodies, for instance, Deloitte, EY, or ABC in England. And once the independent audit is carried out and the auditor makes sure that you are compliant to the 18 clauses of JTI standard, the media outlet will be awarded with the JTI certification, which is valid for 2 years. And this is the JTI certification process. So RSF offers grants for the audit for some of the countries in Southeast Asia, for instance, Thailand. And currently in our region, we work with Deloitte and Onchen Company, an audit firm in Mongolia. So this is an example of CBC News from Canada. This is their JTI certificate. You can see here that they are certified by Deloitte on 2022 August 6. So this certificate can be shown on the CBC page, and it will also appear on the JTI database, which we offer to some of the advertisers and funding bodies. So last, this is the JTI global footprint today. So since its inception, we have seen more than 1,450 media outlets across 85 countries starting their self-evaluation with us. And among them, 185 has published their transparency reports, and 31 of them has achieved the JTI certification. So JTI is actually a tool, so it will only have meaning when media outlets used it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liang Wei. Maybe, I would like. Yes. I have to switch it on. I would like to comment a little bit on this. So you see that this is a certification standard which is not operated by RSF at all. We suggested the idea, we supported the development of this project, and now we're promoting it because we believe it is one of the potential solutions against fake news. We already have the support of Microsoft, which unfortunately is not the biggest platform, but for its search engine, Bing, for LinkedIn. and this is the first platform joining the project. We wish in the future other platforms like Facebook or Google also join and provide in their algorithms some benefits for JTI certified media outlets, because the very purpose of it is that when you Google something, JTI certified contents appear first, so anything that relates to disinformation just is pushed down on the back pages of Google and basically becomes invisible. We want to promote quality contents without any type of censorship, but only by the fact that the media outlets that produce them are open and transparent on their ownership and on their processes. We currently have 1,500 media outlets certified or in the process of being certified. It's not a lot. The project was delayed, especially due to the COVID-19 crisis that lasted very long, especially in Asia. And we believe in the coming years, when we reach a certain critical mass of media outlets, let's say over 10,000 media outlets, it will become impossible for platforms to ignore this standard, and they will somehow have to give some benefit. You can imagine that advertising companies will also have a great interest in this standard, because they can do ethical advertising by purchasing advertising in media outlets which themselves produce ethical news and not disinformation. And of course, this is taking a little bit of power from the platforms, because we don't want the platforms to decide what is a media outlet and what is not. This is taking a little bit of power from governments, and we don't want governments to decide what is a media outlet or not. But this is actually giving a compass for the public to know that these media outlets are media which are transparent on their processes and whose contents at least will not be harmful for them to read. So thank you for your attention. I believe it would be good if we could first have some Q&A about this specific project while it is still fresh. And later, my colleague Alexandra will talk about the World Press Freedom Index, and we can go maybe deeper on the regional or national questions in Thailand. So does anyone have questions relating the JTI certification project?
If you have a question, there's a microphone at the back of the room. Just use your rule and identify yourself and ask a question.
Well, if there's no question, it means that the presentation was well done. Thank you, Liang Wei. And of course, you're welcome to, we will leave the presentation to the club, so you can scan the QR code and you can have a look by yourself. So maybe, Alexandra, can we talk about how we are preparing the World Press Freedom Index and what we plan to do in Bangkok?
Yes, thank you so much, Cedric. My name is Alexandra Bielakowska. I'm Advocacy Manager of Reporters Without Borders Asia-Pacific Bureau. And I'm actually one of the persons that is overseeing the index in our region and compiling the data and access to a survey and basically people who are replying to the index annually. Probably most of you know the World Press Freedom Index. This is one of the most traditional tools of RSF, where we assess the level of freedom enjoyed by journalists in 180 countries and territories around the world. We actually recently, because just 2 years ago, reviewed the methodology of the index. It was done by the panel of experts consisted of 10 experts in media sphere, including journalists and professors from renowned universities around the world. And we assessed during our index, it's a snapshot of the situation of press freedom during the calendar year in the countries that we evaluate, with one small difference, because when there's a huge event happening in the country, we might adjust it in the most recent months, so for example, since January to May. We have 5 categories and 100 questions that our respondents are replying to. One category is political, sector, economic, sociocultural, safety, and legal framework. That is giving us a basis of the assessment of the Press Freedom Index in these countries. So you might see some movement depending on this specific scores in these categories. This questionnaire is actually can be answered 24 language. So far, unfortunately, we don't have Thai language yet, but we will translate it next year, and hopefully we'll have bigger number of respondents to Thailand. However, in the Asia-Pacific region, we already do it in, for example, Chinese, Japanese, Mongolian, and Korean.
If I may interrupt, there is a mistake in the colors of
Yes.
the color code. Good situation is in green, so you see there's not so many countries.
It's only
in
Scandinavia.
green.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Greenland,
actually, you might see, maybe Cedric can say more about the situation right now in Thailand, but Thailand is one of the freest countries in the index right now. The score for the last year is 106, which is, of course, in the middle of the index. But if you compare Thailand to other countries in the region, it scores quite good. One of the best countries in Asia-Pacific is Taiwan, South Korea, of course, Australia, New Zealand, and Timor-Leste. So Thailand still have a quite good score. And then this was like very short introduction to how we do the index, but most importantly, what Cedric said before, we will do it, we'll have our regional press release for Asia Pacific on 3rd of May. We still are in the discussion where this press release will take place. It can be in Bangkok or other city in Thailand. But we already welcome you maybe to join us at the day. And myself, I'm also getting in touch with the media who wants to receive the information under embargo and get the idea of how the index looks like a few days ahead of the release. So please don't hesitate. You can always contact me and let me know if you'd like to receive these materials in advance, also in Thai language, which we'll provide this year.
And how long before can we provide the material under embargo? It's a couple of days, right?
2 days, yes.
2 days, okay. And we can also make interviews in the 2 days before the World Press Freedom Index release. Will actually be in Thailand at that time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Maybe do some of you have questions on the index in general? How we make it, how it works, specific questions? Okay.
Please, sir.
Okay, so there's a microphone in the back.
Okay.
It's more technical. I say it's hard to read the index just sitting out here on the bottom left-hand side to know what it really means. Like you said Thailand was okay, but it looks like it's the same as China. I can't make it out clearly. So it's just a technical question about what color is the best color. Is it yellow?
Okay, so the top color should be green, and it doesn't look so green, but top color good situation should be green. Then yellow for satisfactory situation. Then the light orange for problematic situation. Then darker orange for difficult situation, and red for very serious situation. And I agree that maybe while in the process of transforming the image into a PDF, there have been a problem with the colors of the color code. So we will fix this. But you can see that Thailand is actually at the same level, in the same color code as Japan. As Malaysia, which are countries which do have their problems, but which are not by far in the worst category.
So it's exactly in the middle. This is a problematic situation.
Okay, then my other technical question is, countries obviously have more than one reporter, and one press. So how do you, if you have a country that isn't very free, however, there is one or two outlets that are truthful, how do you evaluate that? Do you, like, if you evaluate by the whole country as a whole, or how do you take account for outliers in a difficult situation?
Thank you. It's a good question. The purpose, so the World Press Freedom Index is an advocacy tool, meaning we do not make it for, let's say, academic or research purpose. We do it to provoke governments. We do it to provoke reactions. We do it to engage with the civil society, with journalists in the world. So we do it as a tool and not as a finality. What we want to evaluate is the general situation in each country, meaning how hard it is for media outlets to independently investigate and to publish the result of their work. And like Alexandra mentioned earlier, there are several criteria. One criteria, for example, the economic situation can be a very big barrier for media outlets to independently report on the news. Of course, the level of pressure from the authorities is another barrier. But the self-censorship applied by media outlets themselves due to the regulation can also be one more barrier. So we try to evaluate the general situation. Even in the worst countries, usually there are, like you said, one or two media outlets which stand out, maybe because they are exiled, or maybe because they are willing to take a big risk in the face of their government. But what we want to assess is the general situation. And when you look at the worst country on earth, which is actually North Korea, there is not a single independent media outlet or a single independent journalist in North Korea. In North Korea, working as a journalist strictly equals to working for the government propaganda. So they normally deserve their ranking of 180 over 180 countries and territories ranked.
Yeah. Actually, there's one important thing that I forgot to add. We also have specific analysis of the safety of journalists in the region around the globe. And each bureaus and our headquarters are monitoring daily the violations of press freedom. It can be murders of journalists or harassment or detentions. And this is also included in the index. So this is very, very important part of the index itself. So you can see, for example, that it influences countries like Philippines or Mexico when the number of killings of journalists is very, very high.
Yeah, but it is not the only criteria. And for example, it happened to us sometimes to see a comment from a Chinese ambassador unhappy to see that China is in the bottom of the World Press Freedom Index, saying, but in China we don't kill journalists. Well, first, this can be discussed because journalists are detained in such bad conditions that they may die after a few years. But also, somehow, the countries in which journalists are being killed for their work, that the situation shows that journalists still have an impact, are still able to publish information that some private interests are afraid of. In the case of China, the whole journalism system has been so much rigged by the current regime that it's almost impossible for journalists to publish any information that goes against the regime's narrative or the regime's propaganda. So that's why we try to ponderate these 5 criteria and come with a global score. And then, of course, it happens that 2 countries would have the same score. But usually it's still possible to see the trend, the tendency, the evolution that would allow us to put one country ahead of the other country. It's not a situation that happens so often.
Good afternoon. My name is Imtiaz Muqbil. I cover the travel and tourism industry in Thailand. I'm also a life member of the FCCT. I had two questions. I wasn't sure from your trust index about the link between how getting that certificate will actually lead to higher revenues. Most of the advertisers essentially, I'm not sure to what extent they actually care about independence or trust. All they want is eyeballs. I'm not sure how that actually adds value to anybody who's pitching for advertising. That's one question. The second question is issues related to ongoing media freedoms right now, particularly your opening comment about how it's all related to the weakening of democracies. Just yesterday you saw in Israel, for example, they've passed a law that will prohibit Jazeera from broadcasting out of there. So the situation seems to be actually getting worse by the year. And at what stage, I mean, how much lower do you actually see this going? Because there does not seem to be any countervailing pressure on the other side to prove the value of good journalism and ensure its support through, I don't know, private sector, NGOs, philanthropies. There doesn't seem to be people on the other side trying to move this up a little bit apart from yourselves. So while the pressure on the other side is getting worse, even from governments, private corporations, et cetera, et cetera. So just these two areas, there doesn't seem to be any light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you. Maybe for JTI, Liang Wei, do you want to answer or should I answer? Okay, I can answer. So for JTI, I would say the final goal of JTI is that the platforms give a bonus in their algorithm for media outlets which bear the JTI certification. That means more money because a better ranking. On the internet, when a media outlet just gains one ranking compared to their competitors or compared to other websites, it means more audience. It means more people finding them through search engines. It means that the advertisers are ready to pay more money for advertising on these sites. So it's almost automatically more revenue for these media outlets. It's also more reputation. So the link is quite straightforward. When it goes to governments, many governments in the world, especially in democracies, have systems to provide financial assistance to the media outlets. And very often they do not know, they have to make up their own system to make the difference between media outlets eligible to receive government aid and others. And this is problematic, of course. We don't want governments to do this. So by following the JTI standards, government can provide media aid in priority to JTI certified media outlets, which is also a good thing. And then you've got advertisers. Actually, it is becoming a very big problem for global companies that when they purchase advertising, the advertising they purchase is being displayed on websites that actually create disinformation content. It's very bad for their image. So the question of ethical advertising has become very important for companies purchasing advertising, and especially global companies. So by privileging the purchase of advertising on JTI certified content, companies can ensure that the money they spend in advertising goes to media outlets which actually produce quality information and not disinformation content. So all this links like a JTI better ranking to better revenue. Of course, this requests the platforms to play the game and to join the project. And like I said, they won't do it until they are forced by a sufficient number of media outlets joining the JTI certification. So far, 1,500 is not enough, but we haven't started a long time ago, and I'm confident that in 2 or 3 years we will have reached this critical mass and they will not be able to avoid using this certification or other certifications. The point, if you buy, like I mentioned earlier, the example of bottled water, if you buy bottled water and you have several certifications on the bottle, you feel even safer to drink it. So JTI doesn't have to be the only standard, but it is the first. and it is so far, I believe, the best tool which we have. And so when it relates, apologies, I have very short memory. May you please rephrase shortly your second question?
Oh,
Okay.
It wasn't me.
Yeah,
It was
it
him.
wasn't you actually.
Yeah, the second question was about the ongoing pressures from government, which seems to be getting worse by the year.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Getting pressure to maintain media.
Yeah. I mean, we're clearly in an era in which authoritarianism is gaining power. And like I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, I believe it is not the fault of authoritarian powers. They do what they do. The problem is that democracies are weakening. In democracies, every day you hear politicians actually using arguments provided by authoritarian powers. Every day you hear politicians accusing legitimate media outlets of imparting fake news. Every day democracies are weakening themselves. Also the fact that democracies had very cynical policies to, let's say, pretend engaging with authoritarian powers while it was hoping that these authoritarian powers would become more democratic or would respect human rights, shows its limitation, because actually China has become extremely powerful through this type of false engagement excuse, and the result we have today is that the Chinese regime has become one of the world's, if not the world's biggest producer of disinformation. So yes, the situation is getting worse and worse. This is why we want to create this alliance of democracies. This is why we want to be more present in democracies and not only be denouncing authoritarian regimes or authoritarian policies, because the point is not that democracies have to protect themselves. They have to adopt together some mechanisms that protect them from the influence of disinformation and fake news. They have to strengthen their core. They have to stand up for their values, and only by doing this they will be able to resist. And I hope if we do this in the coming years and decades, the map could become a little bit more green, if I may say. But this is a long-term fight we have to lead together.
Okay, another question. I'm Terry McCullum from Canada, but just a clarification again, maybe to help understand, or maybe it's just me, how does Thailand, because I can't tell the color, but how do you evaluate Thailand, and in what way? Is it as a whole or in parts? You know, just maybe help just to clarify a bit, if you could explain how Thailand's rating is set up.
Sure, thank you for the question. It's quite easy. We have a certain number of respondents in Thailand or outside Thailand, if they are specialists of Thailand, which share, let's say, our values of support for human rights and freedom of the press and the right to information. Every year we are trying to grow this basis of respondents, first because it's a long questionnaire, there are 80 questions, it's quite detailed, so every year some respondents do not answer it fully or just are too busy to answer, so we keep looking for more respondents to make this index more relevant on every country and territory we evaluate. The respondents receive the questionnaire, it's anonymous, it's online, it's secure, and with the sum of their answers, we give 5 notes on these 5 criteria we were mentioning earlier, and then these 5 notes are used to create one single note, which is the note of the country. And the note evaluates the general level of freedom of the press in the country. And then, after we got a note for every country, we make a ranking. And then we solve the problem of the few countries that might have the exact same note on the exact same criteria, which is quite rare. And we have the annual World Press Freedom Index. And then we have color codes. You basically have five tiers. Can I say that in English? I'm not sure. But anyway, you've got 5 parts. You've got 180 countries in total, so you can do the math, how much in each color. And that's how we make the map.
Yeah, this is about the map, but if anyone wants to see exactly how much Thailand or any other country gets in each indicator, it is also something you can check on our website. So each country has actually every year published the specific number for each indicator. So for Thailand, for example, for economy it's quite high, it's 63, but for political indicator and legislative indicator, because of abusive laws, it's going down, and then we make a sum of it.
Could we possibly show? Actually, I see we're displaying the entry of Thailand on your computer. Yeah, but we need an adapter. If we do have an adapter. Yeah, we are fully transparent on all the criteria we use to make the index, and you're welcome to go to the Reporters Without Borders website, rsf.org, and you will find all details about our methodology. There are only 2 things we do not disclose, and you will understand why, is the number and the identity of respondents. We don't disclose the identity because in some countries the respondents might receive tremendous pressure from their government or other forces for the answers they make. And the number of respondents is that in the smallest countries, we have a minimum of 5 respondents, because it's hard for us to find more, and it would be easy for the authorities in this country to know which are the persons involved in the production of the index for their country. Except for this, everything is transparent and everything is online, and you're welcome to go and have a look. Okay, so you can see the page of Thailand. I can give my seat to Alexandra, so maybe she goes a bit more in detail about how the index is made for Thailand.
Yeah, actually, I think Cedric said everything already, but you can see that we have 5 indicators. We have political indicator, economic indicator, legislative indicator, social indicator, and security indicator. And then we make a sum of it, an average, later on. And then you have a number 106. And this is how the index then is presented for all 180 countries. So it might depend. In Thailand, as I said before, legislative indicator is quite low because of abusive laws. But for example, in China, it will be security indicator because there's 119 journalists detained in China. Yeah, and this is as simple as that. Any further questions about that? No?
So it's hard to read the slide.
I'm trying to make it bigger, but it's... Can you see now? And actually here, if you see, this is a score of Thailand, and it's 55. Sorry, it's difficult to use this computer for me. And actually, in like general index for Thailand, we see the growth in Thailand index. My assessment right now, when we see it, is due to the fact that there was not so many protests, for example. So security indicator went up in the last few years, at least for the 2023. Yes. So do you have any further questions, or?
So you take all these scores and then you make an overall score?
Exactly, exactly. So it might vary from country to country. As I said before, for some countries it will be security because of the number of killings. For some other countries it can be economic situation. I can give example of Mongolia, where the press freedom level is quite okay, but the economic indicator is quite low, and because of that Mongolia is only 80 in the index.
So it's all these factors, you give a score about press freedom in general?
Yes.
Based on all that input?
Yes, and every indicator has specific questions in the RSF survey. So any respondent that has access to the index can see which questions relates to which indicator. So there's specific questions for political indicators, specific questions for legislative indicator, and so on. And also you can see score for each indicator. So for Thailand, actually it's quite balanced because it's around 50 for each score. But there are some countries when one indicator can be 30 and for others 100. So it will depend then. And the additional thing I mentioned before, we also have something called, which is I think not correct way of saying this in English, barometer, when we also analyze the situation in terms of killings of journalists and detained journalists, and it's also shown on our website, and it's part of the index itself later on. And it will show in the security indicator. Yes. I see someone has a question.
Okay, please.
I was just wondering how you choose the respondents, especially in countries where it's perhaps dangerous to be a journalist, or whether journalists are
How to choose respondents.
inevitably have to take sides.
Yeah, we keep looking for respondents because, like I mentioned earlier, it's difficult. It takes a long time to answer the questions, and every year we got 1 or 2 correspondents who don't have. Sorry, you said the respondents. Yes. Yeah. Every year we have 1 or 2 of our respondents not able to complete the questionnaire on time or being too busy. So we keep looking for new respondents. Well, it can be either the country's nationals or foreign correspondents based in this country, or researchers researching on the media environment in this country. The bottom line is that they share the basic values of press freedom and the right to information. So we are not going to send a general questionnaire to, for example, all researchers or media outlets in a country. It wouldn't be helpful. We are trying to have the largest possible number of respondents. And if some of you, by the way, are interested in being a respondent, please let us know. We're always looking for more respondents. But I would say we try to have the widest panel possible made of people who are knowledgeable on the country's situation. The more respondents, the less biases, because it happens very often that some respondents are too dramatic about the situation in their own country. Sometimes in democracies where the situation is quite okay, when one single little problem would turn into a big national drama. On the other hand, in some very problematic countries with very difficult situation, journalists are somehow used to the difficulties and would not necessarily notice there are difficulties. So we are trying to eliminate the bias by having the largest possible number of journalists. Sorry, Alexandra.
Yeah, exactly what Cedric said, and we can also see if there's a biased answer to the index, because if you have like 99% of the index replies which are saying the same thing and 1% saying everything is not correct, then we can see this too, so we can also adjust in some specific situations. But yes, any further questions?
Hey guys, yeah, Tommy Walker for VOA and a newly elected board member of the FCCT. You might have already mentioned this, but you know, how is disinformation reflected in the Press Freedom Index? Because over recent years, especially on Twitter, we've seen so many social media accounts and commentators post fake narratives, and you know, it seems to be increasing. And you know, how are you recording that right now, or in the past, and how are you informing governments that, okay, this country, it might have a free press, but a lot of these fake narratives are coming from this country. So do you record that in any way? How are you recording that, and how are you telling governments that there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation coming from here?
It's a good question, and it's not easy actually. Our index cannot reflect it totally because it's not a disinformation index. It's on how legitimate media outlets can operate. So for sure, if they're facing a lot of disinformation, it's still a disadvantage, and it still somehow impacts on the general mood in the country. In the past years, we have worked in improving the index, for example, when it goes to online harassment hate speech against journalists, which is not the same as disinformation, of course. So, but we are taking in consideration online harassment. But when it goes to pure disinformation, it's actually very hard even to characterize, because disinformation doesn't go through the regular media outlets circuit. It goes directly towards the consumers. There are specific studies made about this question. But for example, how could we know which kind of contents a certain socio-economic category in the population receives through WhatsApp or through Line, which are direct messaging software? It's very difficult for us. I would say this would request some qualitative studies, while this is more a general study which cannot go into these details.
And exactly agreed with Cedric, but one thing that this index is also evolving in time. So as I mentioned, we changed the index just 2 years ago. We adjusted it to the changes that happened in the past 25 years. We cannot have the same questions and answers as in 2000, for example. So we changed the index and try to adjust it. And I think we still analyze how we can include some new threats for journals like AI, for example, or disinformation into the index in the near future.
Yeah, I would add that we cannot change the index methodology too much,
yes,
too many times, too often. Otherwise, it would make it impossible to compare the results from 1 year to another year. And actually, very often, we have difficulties with the ranking of some countries going up or down for technical reasons. And it's necessary because in a ranking, you have to have a first and you have to have a last. And even if all the scores are going down, you still need to have a first and a last. So it happens certain years that some countries go up in the ranking while the situation has actually deteriorated. And on the other hand, it happens that some countries will have a better situation, but that they go down in the ranking. So we always have a narrative provided together with the ranking, which you can also find on the website. And the narrative is somehow ponderating the ranking or explaining why there has been a move this year compared to the previous year. We're doing our best so that this ranking would be a useful tool for anyone wishing to evaluate the general situation of press freedom in the countries. But just like any tool, it's necessarily imperfect. We're working in making it as good as we can year after year, and any suggestion is welcome, of course. Do we have other questions? Or maybe you want to talk more about Thailand, even though we didn't come here to especially first we're not more knowledgeable than you on this matter, but maybe I would be interested in having some feedback from some of you. Do you think the Thai ranking in the index is justified? Is it too high, too low in your view? Which are the major problems? I personally would be very much interested to hear from foreign correspondents based in Thailand. What is your general opinion on the country? Anyone? Yes? Okay, we got a volunteer.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Head from the BBC. I think if you're asking for the opinion of correspondents here, I'm also on the board of the FCC, so it's something we talk about a great deal. I think the Thais will be very pleased to see themselves up-ranking with Japan when it comes to media freedom. We, among ourselves, often have discussions about, Thailand and the region. And, one of the points we make is that whatever problems Thailand has, and they're real, this is probably one of the best places for a foreign correspondent to be based. There's no rival. We're all here for a reason. It isn't just that it's convenient and an easy place to live. In terms of media freedom, it's better, partly because most of the neighboring countries are so poor. But if you want the issues that matter here, they're pretty straightforward. Lèse-majesty law continues to be a problem, though most of us navigate it. And you can report about the monarchy, but there are strict limits and obviously very severe penalties. A bigger issue is criminal defamation. The criminal defamation law here means, in effect, investigative journalism is impossible, because the moment you say anything specific that is negative about anyone who's at all powerful, any business, they will sue you. And it doesn't matter how sound your, truth is not a defense of defamation here. So there is no defense, and it doesn't matter whether you're found not guilty at the end. The process takes years, in which you have to post bail. You spend enormously on legal fees. For most journalists who don't work for a big organization, it's essentially impractical to defend yourself against a criminal defamation suit, particularly against a powerful business. So when it comes to discussing doing a story, however good your evidence is, you won't do it because your editors will say it's not worth it. It would have to be an exceptional story for them to think it worth the risk. Even my company, the BBC, would think twice unless the story was important, given the enormous amounts of money needed to defend somebody. So criminal defamation, it's not, Thailand isn't the only country that has it, but it's an absolutely critical problem here in terms of really free reporting. And those are really the key issues, I would say, that really affect foreign correspondents here.
Thank you so much. Well, these are also like the two main issues we have identified, and we actually, not in this mission, this is our first, but we actually wish to convey very clearly these issues to the Thai government. Like I mentioned earlier when talking about the governor of Bangkok, it seems that the Thai authorities are extremely sensitive to the ranking of their country in the World Press Index, which is a very good thing actually, which means that we have somehow a way to lever and to talk with them. I understand that a bad press freedom index ranking may have some impact on tourism, it may have some impact on investment, it may have some impact on the general notes, notation of the country. So, and indeed, this index is being used by press agencies, it's being used by notation agencies, so this is something that many governments take seriously. We haven't been able to really do that in the past, mostly because the whole Southeast Asia region was monitored from Paris by one single person in the past, and I believe it's very good news that our bureau, based in the region with a team that will reach 15 persons in the middle of the year, now can do much more in terms of advocacy and engagement with governments. And we are going to convey this message to the Thai authorities. Thank you very much. Are there other issues or comments? Or I heard this morning, I was talking with a former journalist who mentioned the question of media economy in Thailand, the fact that there's not much journalistic training, that there is no journalism school per se, that a lot of journalists are not necessarily conscious of the ethical boundaries. Is this also a problem? The fact that media outlets do not necessarily have care about ethical questions because they mostly struggle for economic questions, which is something that many democracies have to face. Is that a problem? Anyone has some point of view on this? No, not especially.
I mean, there are some journalism school, but yeah, I mean, in terms of the practice, it's a big challenge, and the media organization, especially domestic ones, that's we'll see a range of practices, and it's something that always can be improved. Yeah.
Yeah, but the perception of press freedom, I believe it really depends from where you come from. I originally graduated as a reporter. I'm from France. Well, when I was a student journalist in France, I thought the level of press freedom in my country was good. I had no, I didn't have any other criteria. Now that I see my own country from the outside, I realize it's not that good. It's just that I didn't have any criteria to evaluate it. And in many countries in the world, it's the same. The people are used to the environment. They consider it's normal. In some countries, it's normal to give a red envelope to journalists when they go to a press conference, and journalists are expecting it because they are underpaid, and they don't see this as corruption, but just as a practice. In France, we used to have, and probably we still have, like the media trips provided by global companies, and of course they will decide which journalists they invite, and if you write something they don't like, they won't invite you the next time. There's a lot of things like this. So we somehow believe the situation of Thailand has nothing extraordinary, which doesn't mean it's good and which doesn't mean it doesn't need fixings, but we must somehow approach Thailand not just to denounce things that are not perfect, but try and find a way with the Thai stakeholders, with the media outlets, with their civil society organizations, how we can try to provide solutions. Even the government, for part of the problems, may be helpful in finding solutions. At least we hope this. Yeah. I don't know, do we have any more questions? Any question on your side, maybe? Or shall we just close the session? And of course, you're welcome if you have other questions you want to ask in private. We're still here for a while. At what time is our next appointment?
We have like 15 minutes. So no.
Then we have 50 minutes for a coffee, and you're welcome. And also, if some of you are interested in being a respondent or have other things you want to discuss with us, you're more than welcome to join. Thank you so much for your attention today, and hopefully see you next month when we release the World Press Freedom Index in Bangkok. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, guys. And yeah, see you next month.
Thank you so much for your help.